Okay, so the War on Terror and the incident in 9/11 is going to really closely lead us to the war in Iraq. Now, obviously, after 9/11 and during the War on Terror, we were at a heightened state of paranoia and fear about other attacks against foreign enemies, especially Middle Eastern terrorist groups. And one, remember, because of that axis of evil, one of the countries we've been keeping our eyes on was Iraq. Remember, they were under the dictatorship of Saddam Hussein, who we last fought back in the Persian Gulf War with President George Herbert Walker Bush Sr. So in about mid-2002, the UN started focusing a lot of attention on Iraq also. The United States, along with UN intelligence agencies, had come back with information saying that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, and that they also had the ability to produce more. So the UN Security Council passes a resolution requiring Iraq to open up to UN's weapons inspectors or else face serious consequences. Now, the reason why we didn't lay out what those serious consequences were is because we couldn't agree what they should be. Both France and Russia said that they would veto anything calling for force against Iraq because they didn't want to have to put any of their troops in the line of fire. So the security threat that we verified, here, the source that gave us this information was known as unreliable, but it didn't matter because we were so paranoid that like any amount of information we were just going to like jump on. So we decided to do the invasion without the UN. And so on March 17th of 2003, Bush gets on television and he says to Saddam Hussein on camera, he says, "You and your two sons have 48 hours to leave Iraq or face invasion." And obviously they refuse. So 48 hours later, we began the invasion of Iraq. The invasion of Iraq was actually very short and sweet. The Iraqi government and military collapses in about 3 weeks. Both of Saddam Hussein's two sons were killed in a firefight with U.S. forces in early July, and Saddam was found in a spider hole in December 13th of 2002, of 2003. This is the hole actually that we found him in. This is what he looked like when we pulled him out. And we will sort of, check him out and then return him to the Iraqi people who will execute him. They hang him. So, the weapons of mass destruction were never actually found in Iraq. But we don't leave. After we arrested Saddam Hussein, we don't leave. We remain in Iraq. And a lot of people were sort of like, why are we still there? Like, what's going on? There were, constant American casualties and suicide bombings and things like that. So people were really unsupportive of the war. So this is going to lead back to that political division that we had seen back in the election of 2000. And we're sort of happening all over again. That unity that we got out of 9/11 is sort of falling apart here. And this is sort of where most people became upset with George Bush. Like, had he pulled troops out after arresting Saddam Hussein, everything would have been probably gravy. But he decides not to. He keeps troops in Iraq, and a lot of people were sort of very confused about that and very unhappy. All right, Hurricane Katrina. So Hurricane Katrina, which hit in August of 2005, was one of the 5 deadliest hurricanes in U.S. history. It was the 3rd most intense landfalling tropical cyclone of all time, and it led to the deaths of over 1,200 people, not only from the storm but from the flooding as well. We saw $108 billion worth of property damage from this. The disaster areas were largely Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, and the Florida Panhandle. The reason why Katrina is so important to know about, though, is from the mistakes that we see our government make during all of this. It just showed that we weren't prepared or equipped to handle a natural disaster on this level, which is bad because that's sort of the government's whole job. So the state of Louisiana, by far and wide, made the most amount of mistakes. And the governor of Louisiana at the time was this woman you see on the slide, Kathleen Blanco. They ordered the evacuation of Louisiana and of New Orleans, but it was really too late by the time they did. And in addition to that, she made no arrangements for the 120,000 poor elderly and sick people living in the inner city who were incapable of evacuating themselves. She also wouldn't give control of her National Guard over to the president, so no one ended up being called out to stop the looting. The looting wasn't even addressed until 5 days after the hurricane, so the businesses that weren't even damaged from the flood were damaged from looters. The federal government's mistakes came from the organization, the Federal Emergency and Management Agency, or FEMA. FEMA is mostly supposed to be handling, natural disaster type situation, sort of like the Red Cross. The head of FEMA at the time was this man named Michael Brown. And the reason why George Bush sort of gets critiqued in all of this is because he went on TV and said that Michael Brown was doing a good job, and in reality, he was not. FEMA had, thousands of people living in really horrible conditions in the Louisiana Superdome where the Saints play. They weren't given medical attention. They weren't given enough food and water. Some of them were being forced to wear trash bags for like 8 days. They weren't given showers, things like that. And that was being broadcast all over TV for days and days and days. And then Michael Brown went on TV and was like, I had no idea, which was clearly not true because the rest of the American people did know. So Congress had to do a massive investigation into the whole thing. And since then, FEMA has really been revamped. And the way it works is very different today. This will cause Bush's approval ratings to drop to the lowest that they ever were. He was really accused for appointing people to do jobs who were really unqualified. All right, so since Bush can't run for re-election and his VP, Dick Cheney, decides not to run, this is the first time since 1928 that there is no incumbent from either party to run in the presidential election, which is going to lead to a very interesting election on both sides. The Democrats are going to nominate Barack Obama, a Columbia University grad and Harvard Law School grad from Honolulu, Hawaii. He was a civil rights attorney out of Chicago for many years. He taught constitutional law at the University of Chicago, and then served one term as a senator from Illinois. Now, that was largely controversial because his whole time as a senator, he was pretty much running for president. So he didn't really have any experience. Joe Biden will be his vice president pick. He has been a senator from Delaware since 1972, active in legislation on terrorism, drug policy, and crime, known for being bipartisan and working well with Republicans. He had run in the primary that year but lost, so it made sense that Obama would pick him up as VP. So the Democrats are going to see a lot of controversy in their national convention that year revolving the superdelegate and Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton's always causing drama, right? So Hillary had a large amount of superdelegates, and people were upset about that because superdelegates are non-elected party officials who can vote for whoever they want to. And a lot of people don't like this because we see the idea of a non-elected official outweighing the voice of the people. In addition to that, Michigan and Florida had changed their primary vote dates, moving them up to be sooner than originally planned. And that Hillary won both of those states. But a lot of people said maybe she won because Obama didn't have time to campaign because the time was shortened with not a lot of warning. So the committee voted to nullify the votes from both Michigan and Florida. Obviously, Hillary pitches a fit, so they decide they will allow them, but only half of the votes. But it doesn't matter. Hillary doesn't get enough, and Barack Obama is the pick for the Democratic Party now. Side note, it is during this campaign that the whole show us your birth certificate, were you born in the United States or were you born in Africa, rumor got started, and it was actually started by the Hillary Clinton campaign. As for the Republicans, they will nominate John McCain, who is still a senator from the state of Arizona. He graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy back in 1958, became a naval aviator in the Vietnam War. During his 23rd bombing mission in 1967, he was shot down and very badly injured and captured by North Vietnamese troops. He was held as a prisoner of war for 5.5 years and not released until 1973. For those 5.5 years, he was repeatedly abused and tortured. If you ever see him and you see that he doesn't hold if you see him wave at a crowd or something and he doesn't hold his arms up very high, that's because he physically can't. His arms are actually repeatedly broken and healed improperly, and his shoulders actually won't, the ball and socket of his shoulder won't rotate all the way up because of improper healing. So he was elected to the House of Representatives in 1982 and then the Senate in 1986, which is where he's been ever since. So he's really considered a maverick within the Republican Party because he has had no problem going against his own party to follow his own beliefs or values. Even, currently he's often in the news for being outspoken against President Trump, even though they're of the same political party. His vice presidential pick will be Sarah Palin, governor of Alaska. Only the second female vice president to ever run, and the first for the Republican Party. She went to the University of Idaho, was a journalism major, worked as a sports reporter at Anchorage. She worked for this. She got elected to city council in Anchorage, then was elected mayor, then governor. She gained national attention for the same reasons as John McCain, calling out GOP members for ethical violations. So during the campaign, the big issues were Iraq, the economy, healthcare, race, and gender. These were all really big things. This is an important election. Obama spent a grand total of $760 million on his campaign, and John McCain spent about $380 million, so about half of what Obama spent. Per vote, Obama spent about $11 a vote, and John McCain spent about almost $6 a vote, but about $5 and, some change per vote. So there was some election day controversy this year. From this election, we found close to 1,500 fake votes that were either from dead voters or underage voters, and a lot of those had been registered by a group called the Association of Community Organizers for Reform Now. The acronym is ACORN. So Acorn had actually endorsed Obama and made even a PAC for him. They had hired him as legal counsel back in 1995. He even hired an Acorn employee for $800,000 to start a Get Out the Vote campaign during the primary. So Acorn was a very controversial thing, and this is going to start a whole conversation about, voter fraud and things like that. So in the end, though, Obama does win the popular vote by he wins 56% of the popular vote, and the way he did that was by winning literally every single minority and special interest group in the country: women, voters under 30, African Americans, Latinos, first-time voters, voters making less than $100,000 a year. By far and wide, this is what got him elected, and this is what Hillary Clinton needed to repeat in 2016, but unfortunately she wasn't able to. So, the financial meltdown of 2008, known as the Great Recession. This was our worst financial crisis since the Great Depression, and there were a lot of causes, and it's been very widely debated, but I'm going to give you 7. Number 1 is subprime lending. Subprime just means, bad lending, risky loans. So banks were hitting some serious competition, so a lot of them were giving out, or they were relaxing their standards for loan giving. Subprime loans aren't necessarily bad, but they should never be more than 10% of all your loans. And in 2006, they were 20%. So we're giving out twice as many risky loans as we should be. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, also known as the Federal National Mortgage Association, that's Fannie Mae, and then the Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation, that's Freddie Mac, they had started this trend back in 1995. Reason number 2, the housing bubble. Between 1998 and 2006, housing prices went up 124%. This creates the illusion that the housing market is doing very well. But in reality, it's hollow, right? Not all of those homes have been paid for. And then when the bubble pops in 2006, homes start getting foreclosed on. In 2007, 1.3 million homes were foreclosed on. In 2008, 2.3 million homes were foreclosed on. So people are losing their homes at an exponentially growing rate. By September of 2009, the total number of homes either delinquent or in foreclosure was 15% of all homes in the United States. Reason number 3, credit conditions. The Federal Reserve had lowered interest rates after 9/11 to help things along. This made it easier to get loans, make it more possible to give out risky loans. You don't have to have as good credit to get a home loan. Reason number 4, fraudulent practices. Banks were actually giving out loans that were literally illegal. They were so bad just to make more money. Reason number 5, predatory lending. Banks would advertise low interest rates and then write it into your contract and then raise it at the last minute before closing. This is essentially fraud, and it is illegal. Reason number 6, deregulation. A lot of laws have been passed over the decades previously to weaken parts of our financial system. Jimmy Carter passed the Depository Institutions Deregulation and Monetary Control Act, which phased out bank restrictions. Bill Clinton passed the Gramm-Leach Bliley Act, which let banks own other financial companies, which is sort of a violation, or it's a, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't remember, but it's bad, essentially. Just know that. That's bad. It's creating a monopoly. So, and also the head of the Federal Reserve, Alan Greenspan, fought hard for deregulation throughout the 90s.